Hello and welcome to The Baker's Show. At Baker's, everyone wins when it comes to saving big. Because when you order online through the Baker's app, you get the same great prices, deals, and rewards on pickup or delivery that you do in-store, with no hidden fees or markups. So no matter how you shop, you'll always save big at Baker's. Baker's, fresh for everyone.
Save big on your favorites with the Buy 5 or More, Save $1 each sale. Simply buy 5 or more participating items and save $1 each with your card. Baker's, fresh for everyone.
Hello and welcome to this latest episode of Chasing Creativity. I'm Kiran Manral, your host. Today my guest is graphic artist and designer Mishta Roy. Welcome to Chasing Creativity, Mishta.
Thank you.
Mishta, tell me.
Yes.
I have always been so fascinated by the work you do. How did art come to you?
So, I came to art at a very young age because my mother would take me to a studio she would rent when I was, I think, 7. And I have these wonderful memories of just sitting on the floor surrounded by easels and turpentine and all these, artists painting some sort of model or a flower vase. And she would give me like a couple of half-empty tubes of paint to, play with and have memories of these, fingerprints on pieces of, scraps of paper. I went into art college and did 4 years there, just absolutely determined that, I was always going to paint and hold brushes and work with canvas and all kinds of textures and brush strokes. So the love I had for color and just creating something from a blank space it was as natural as breathing. So every house we moved with my parents, my dad had a transferable job. There was always a tiny room that would be converted into a little studio for me, where I would appropriate my mother's vacuum cleaner and use it to sort of spray paint, much to her dismay, to canvas to get different textures. So yeah, I mean, my love for art and consequently for books as well, because I mean, I always felt that figurative, a figurative expression and what you read in books through words, they flow together so simultaneously and seamlessly. It was very hard for me rather to sort of differentiate between them. So while I was, furiously painting away, I would be also sitting in my grandmother's house where I would be just reading all kinds of books. No one stopped me. So I was reading Doris Lessing when I was, 13 years old with absolutely no understanding of what I was reading. But so I was absolutely a voracious reader. And in fact, today is the, Francois Gillot died, who was an artist who was a great partner of Picasso's, and she was a great artist in her own right, and she was surrounded by this genius and his, temper, and she survived it, and she left him. She was one of the few women who left him, and she wrote this book about her experience with him, and it was an absolutely great influence in my life. I believe I think I read it when I was 14 years old, and it sort of changed the way I looked at women who do art and sort of come in touch with the world of men and figures and different moods. So it was a huge influence on me, Francois Gillot's world. It changed a lot of things for me. It opened up a huge perspective on what art can really be, and how reading various books can inform what I put onto that canvas. So yes, art was a part of my life from a really young age. Yes.
So you spoke about a very twisted path that took you onto design and graphic design.
Yes.
Tell us how that came about.
So, like I said, I was in College of Art in Delhi, and I was doing a 4-year bachelor's degree there. And while I was doing that, I would cut a lot of classes and I would secret away to St. Stephen's College, which was in Delhi University. And I had a big bunch of friends there who were studying philosophy. And I would sit in on the classes there and sort of learn all about the various philosophers and Nietzsche and it was fascinating for me to, like I said, inform my painting with all these philosophers and what they thought. I attended the English classes there also, and I think some of the professors thought I belonged in that class because I would go and read out poetry that I wrote there, and it was absolutely wonderful. And I went to St. Martin's, which is in London, on those 2 scholarships to study a master's in fine art. I was still doing fine art. It was a master's in fine art. And I met this hugely eclectic bunch there who were in my class. There was one artist who was shocking goldfish all the time because he was writing a paper on minimalism and death. So people were doing extremely strange things. There was someone who was sticking filled garbage bags on the roof. Another one who was taking Barbie doll heads off and putting dinosaur heads on them. And I think at the end of the year, I got very confused, as to what art is. It was also a huge cultural shock for me because that was the first time at the age of 20 that I was away from India, away from my family, away from everything I knew, and seeing art in these absolutely different terms, than what I was exposed to. College of Art in Delhi was a typical art college, as you would imagine the traditionalists, would describe. There was painting, there was printmaking, there was sculpture. So there was nothing of this extraordinary way that art was perceived and viewed and produced the way I saw it in London. And I came back after that year very much in the sort of clutches of an identity crisis. Also, when I came back, I realized I had to make a choice. Either I stick to being an artist, which means that I would have to go back to Calcutta where my parents are and, have them support me for a while I sort of pick up the practice and do the circuit of getting into, my work being shown at galleries, etc. Or I quickly get a job and still work on art on the side. It wasn't a decision that took a lot of time because, you want to stand on your own feet, obviously. So I joined tehelka.com in Delhi in its heyday, where we had this wonderful studio with, Mac computers for everybody and all these NID designers that I worked with at the time. And Arundhati Ghosh's first article on the Narmada River, I made the illustrations for that piece. Sir Naipaul's father, he wrote one book and I did the cover and the illustrations for that. So it was a wonderful time, and slowly art changed into design. Before I knew it, the illustrations that I was doing, it turned somewhere into cover design, into design for little leaflets, pamphlets for the website that Telka was running at that time. So that's what I mean by twisted, an identity crisis that very slowly changed, or rather ran away from a very distinctly modernist art that I saw, and I couldn't understand, to sort of earning my own money and, uh, moving slowly and seamlessly into design. Yeah.
So, are there any regrets of any sorts? I mean, you move from fine art to design.
Yes.
There is the sanctity of fine art, there is the purity of fine art, there is the elevated status that fine art enjoys. And design is perceived or is looked upon as the crass cousin of fine art in a way. So do you ever feel that perhaps I should have pursued that?
Oh, sure. I mean, I feel it a lot. In fact, my idea of art was very tightly tied to a person I was dating at the time from that, like I said, from St. Stephen's in the philosophy department. And I always very determinedly believed that I was going to be this artist and he was going to be this writer slash poet, and we were going to rule the world. I mean, it's the way youth sees itself. With this absolute certainty of what you're going to make of yourself. And even when I look back now, and I marvel at the confidence I had, of just being anything I wanted to be. I mean, there were no responsibilities, there were no ties. It was just you and your wishes to just change into something like this genie. So there's this beauty and sort of purity in that, as you said, of not just the art, but of the person you were, that the art was connected to at that point. And I think as you get older, I mean, the design also evolved with the person I evolved into. I mean, obviously we broke up, and art went out of the window with that person for a while, and design came into my life. So there was this change in the kind of person I became, and obviously a change in the kind of work I started doing, which was design. So I never really looked at it in terms of it being not pure or more commercial, even though at that point, even in college, it was called commercial art. But I just looked at it in terms of the kind of person I became. So I think when I relate it that way, it's easier to sort of focus on the change and the aspect of growing up and growing into something. Yeah.
That's that's lovely. That's absolutely lovely. Growing into the person you've become.
Yes.
Mishta, there are steps. I read that there are steps to the creative design process. Would you like to take our listeners through those steps as to how do you work when you get a brief?
So when I get a brief, I think my brain works very fast. Even while the author is speaking to me about it, I have these sort of bursts of images, just bombarding my brain from all sides. And even before the author has finished speaking, I've got this set of, visuals sort of vibrating inside my head. Or even when I've read the email, so I sort of run to my computer and I start sorting through those images, because there's this absolute excitement that you want to take these images and you want to bring them to life somehow. It's like birthing a child, where you're literally looking for two arms, two legs, the neck, the navel, and you want to put it together like a clay figure, except that here it's this blank space that you have to construct and bring into being. So it's a wonderful process for me, because you these images are never sort of a straight line. It's all lateral thinking. You have a tree, and from the tree you jump to the fruit, and from the fruit you jump to the clouds, and from the clouds you jump to the sun. So you're leaping from image to image through these fairly loose connections, and you bring a metaphor into being that would sort of work and link to the brief that you've got. And once you create a sort of folder, which is filled with these various images, then I go to Photoshop and I start creating a loose collage with these images. Does this work with this? Does that work with this? Does this work with that and that? And slowly something comes into being, where these images sort of fit together like puzzle pieces, and connects to the author's brief. And of course, after that, you create the structure of the book cover, and you bring the image into the various structures and the skeletal frame, so to speak, and you create the back cover, the spine, everything sort of linking to the original image that you've created for the front. And then the fonts come into being. It's all a matter of choosing what works with what. And that process is it's such a beautiful one, because uh, it's like when you're choosing words for a sentence, you know that you're describing something, and you have these synonyms, this word plus this word. So it's the same process where you've sort of linked these visuals, and then the fonts, and then the colors, and they all come together to create this beautiful whole. And you do it again about another 5 to 6 times, and you hope that the author will like them. So yeah.
Well, Mishta, I
Okay.
do know that you've done some of my best covers from the very beginning for my very first book. And I know I've loved them all. So I'm very grateful to you for them.
And I've enjoyed the process. I mean, that's what I think, I sort of bring to the table when I'm designing covers. I make it a point to read and try to understand what the author wants. So it's important to see the words and understand before bringing a visual to the table, because they have to work together. If it doesn't, then there's no point, because the cover is a sort of just an external symbolic visual of the story itself. So it's important to understand what the author is trying to say, what the story is, what the book is trying to talk about, whether it's a academic book, or a work of fiction and or non-fiction, whatever it could be. Yeah, yeah.
And they've been most
And I wasn't always doing books anyway. I mean, I've done magazines, I've done massive backdrops, I've done billboards, I've done identities for various companies. So yes, there's been a lot of different design that has come to the table. Yeah.
wonderful. What is it that you've enjoyed the most? Any project that really stands back in your memory as something you really enjoyed working upon, and why?
Oh gosh, yes, yes. I think once I got married and we moved to Bombay in about 2005, and I decided to be a freelancer at that point, because I couldn't handle the idea of using local trains to go somewhere, for a office job. And I took that chance to sort of build a practice of my own slowly. And one of the first, clients that I got was Art India magazine,
Mm-hmm.
which is run by Sangeeta Jindal
Mm-hmm.
of the Jindal company. And I did Art India for many, many years. I would design the magazine cover to cover, the entire 150 pages of it. And it was a quarterly magazine. And it was the most wonderful experience for me, especially because it finally got me to a point where I was designing for fine art.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I had so much love and sentiment for that magazine, because I was reading about fine art, I was designing for fine art, and it felt like paying homage to something, to the space I came from. And the editor, Abhay Sardesai, always said that I understood designing for the magazine better because I came from a fine art background. So yes, it was one of my most sort of affectionate and beloved assignments.
Here our worlds collide again. Abhay was a classmate, and I'm so glad to hear that you designed Art India. I didn't know that part.
Really? Oh my God! And for years, not just a couple of years. I think I designed Art India for 8, 9 years.
Tell me, Mishta, what do you think is creativity? How would you define it if you were pressed to?
Oh dear, that is such a toughie, actually. There's no single sentence that can do that, right? You know
Uh,
that. Creativity is, there's this sort of metaphor that speaks about life and says that when you put your foot in a stream and the water flows over your foot,
mhm.
and then you take your foot out and you put it back in the stream, it's not the same water that will flow over your foot,
And it-
right?
mm,
And that's it's used as a metaphor for life. And I think it sort of holds true for creativity as well,
mhm.
because um, a sort of experience you have in your soul in your mind, in your heart, about something you see or feel that explodes in your head, about a brief or a description, or like I said, a signboard or anything that you're supposed to create, uh, within the next moment it will be something different that you see. So creativity for me is something that is constantly changing. The way you interact with the world, the way you interact with the brief, the way the brief interacts with you. I mean, it's an ongoing process that is in constant change. So it's not something that is tangible. I would say creativity is this act of constant change, which connects you to the entire universe through images. Yeah, I mean, that's how sort of portentous I can get about it.
I ask this, Mishta, I ask about creativity because in recent times we've been hearing so much about AI generated images, AI generated paintings. And I keep wondering, where does that leave the creative element,
Yeah,
the human element? Would you like to
yeah.
comment on this?
Yeah, I mean, in fact, very recently, as last week, there was Saatchi and Saatchi had this exhibition where they showed a completely AI created gallery show that they put on, and there was this huge outcry from traditional artists saying that we are struggling as it is, and you're promoting AI art. I mean, where does that leave artists? So it is a conflict of the times where the traditionalists get left behind, and newer and newer sort of methods take over. So sort of in out with the old and in with the new is sadly a situation that has existed constantly. I mean, look at the craftsmen of India, who work so hard on all the traditional arts, and nowadays you only see them in dastkar when you pick up a bowl or a little purse, and that's what they've been reduced to, or the Pachitra painters. So there is, of course, this huge conflict, between various, modernist styles and genres, and one has to fight. I mean, it's you hold on to your space best as you can. That's the reality, unfortunately.
How do you think this will play out, Mishta? The conflict between AI and human created art?
Yeah. I frankly wouldn't know, Kiran. I mean, it's a hard one to answer because there's so many doomsayers who are already talking about, the Terminator coming to life and AI taking over the entire world.
Mm-hmm.
And it's hard to sort of separate the gloom and doom of what AI is going to do in the future versus how much man will control and sort of stay true to the enriching histories and culture and art that it has. But I would like to believe that we have enough, love for what man has created. I mean, right from the pyramids to, the various art forms and artists today, to sort of preserve it, hold on to it, and allow a line of continuity. And AI would have its own space. I don't see it becoming, sort of dominant. I mean, it'll have its space, it'll have its sort of own identity, but man generated art, sort of created art will always be there. I mean, because man has this man and woman, sorry, I think we always have this need to create. I mean, that has been there throughout all the ages, our need to create. I mean, even if you look at cavemen, that they daubed little horses on the rock walls. So the need to create from your own fingers, from your own self, is always going to be an impulse that no AI generated art can sort of take over. So yeah.
Amen to that. I hope that your words do come true and we do survive as creators and artists. Mishta, you
I'm sure we will.
absolutely fingers crossed. Mishta, you worked through a very difficult condition that you have, and this is peripheral neuropathy. And
Yes,
you're very vocal about what you go
yes.
through. And how difficult is it for you as a creator, as an artist, as a person? Because it's a it's a disease that affects your fingers, it affects your, sensations. How do you cope with it? How do you manage? How do you create? If you don't mind sharing with us.
No, it has been hard. I mean, it's exactly 10 years this year when I had my daughter, and something went wrong in the C-section that I had, and I was left with this very severe condition where the nerves in my hands and feet start to die, and it creates a situation of 24/7 pain. I mean, that is what peripheral neuropathy presents as. It's just continuous pain, and there's only more and more powerful drugs that sort of suppress the pain. So I get about 3.5 hours of some relief, and then the pain is back, and more drugs, and so a large part of my day is spent sort of just thinking about drugs, frankly. And so I find that the last 10 years, they have been frankly very difficult. I've had to let go of a lot of clients that I worked with, because I simply couldn't work at the kind of pace I would before. I could finish a 100-page coffee table book in under a week before, but now it takes longer and much longer. I need help. I'd have to hire a junior designer to help me, and as someone who's sort of taken care of her own work always, it's very hard to sort of hand over control to someone else and watch that person do it. um, so yes, I mean, it's a difficult situation. I also find my creativity is expressed through this lens of pain. So whatever I'm thinking of, there's always this underlying
Mm-hmm.
layer of pain. I mean, which my fingers and my feet don't let me forget. I use a walking stick when I go out, but again, I try to work as much as a creative person as possible. So I have to, the walking sticks, I've purchased them from all over the world, and I have a collection now which matches different outfits. I have a gold stick, I have a red stick, I have a blue stick, I have a snakeskin stick. So
Lovely.
I even bought a stick from Egypt from our last trip. So I try to bring that creativity and aestheticism into this condition as much as possible. I have to wear socks 24/7. So, I'm looking for different colorful socks all the time. So I try to bring whatever cheer I can as a creative person into this. So I'm working with mostly just book covers now, because I find that is the limit of what I can handle at this point. I can't do that many coffee table books, as I said, but a single book cover uh, allows me that control that I still can do with this condition. Um, I do yearn for the days where I could do so much. Of course, it's hard, and there's some days which are really frustrating, and I feel really angry that this happened to me. But it's easy to look at my daughter and think the trade-off was fine.
But more power to you, Mishta, for continuing to do what you do despite this. And
Thank you,
I
thank you.
and another fascinating thing you started is this Drawater Gardens.
Uh-huh.
How did that
Yes.
happen?
So it was during COVID, in fact. I was, my daughter and I were trying to figure out things to do together. And I also wanted to sort of train my fingers to have a little more dexterity, because they do tend to get stiff or shake, especially when I'm trying to hold the mouse. So I wanted to do something that would, bring back that dexterity and flexibility. And I've always been fascinated by the idea of miniatures. When I was very young, I used to use those. Do you remember those big white thermocol pieces? They would
Mm-hmm.
place and pack the TVs with, in the 80s.
Yes.
So I would use those thermocol pieces to create a doll's house.
How lovely.
So each piece, so each piece would, have these different shapes built into them, and I'd create beds out of each shapes or cupboards, and so it was a very intricate little world that I would, do, and I have these, sort of memories of really loving that moment in time. They were very happy memories. So I wanted to bring that to my daughter, and I couldn't find that thermocol. So we started using clay plates and plants and paper and trying to create those little worlds. And that's how Drawater Gardens came about. I mean, they're just these little miniature worlds that you find compressed into a single bubble of space. So it could be a garden with a picnic, and most people come to me with sort of assignments that they want a very specific subject made in the garden. So I do that for them. So they'd say that I have a anniversary coming up, so I'd create this little garden and with succulents and paper flowers, and these paper flowers that are used in Bengali Durga Puja time, from a material called shola. Or I'd use trees from those wooden stamps. So they're very interesting materials used in the gardens. They're not actual fairy gardens the way you see in a real garden shop where they're made out of real plants. These are created from organic material that are used in craft in India. So I pick up all those, and they're also used from found objects, little twigs, pebbles, seashells, and I put them all together to create this little miniature space. Then there are these tiny wine glasses, little cameras, small chairs, little people created out of clay or ceramic, tiny tea sets. And this little world comes across. One assignment, in fact, was this woman. She had bought this set of tiny animals from Benares, these little wooden animals from Benares. And she wanted me to sort of place them in a little garden so that she'd always have that memory, but of those animals and her trip in a single space. So I made this little forest and I put her animals in them, and it worked out so beautifully. So I created Drawater Gardens as an offshoot of Drawater, which is the name of my design company. That there's still a creative space here that's happening, but it's this miniature gardens, and I just thoroughly enjoyed the gardens so much. Making each one is an absolute joy.
And they're really lovely to look at. Very soothing indeed. Talking of Drawater, I read an interesting anecdote of how that name came about. Could you tell us?
Mhm. So
This,
my husband coined the term, and he said that if you can draw water, which is one of the most difficult things to translate onto paper, then you'll be a true artist. So the name just stuck. It came out. It came into being as the name of my company. Yeah.
wonderful. Mishta, tell us, is there any project that is your dream project and you haven't been able to do it yet? What would that be?
Oh yes, I mean all of us have a dream project in us, and mine definitely would be this sort of a book that would showcase all the various forms of design that I've done in my life, whether it's writing or designing or painting. So I would love to create something like that would just be beautiful to hold and read and admire in the pictures, and give that to my daughter, so she'd have a sort of piece of my aesthetics in her hand always. So I mean, the doctors tell me that in another 10 to 15 years I'll be in a wheelchair, and I assume my hands will also get tougher to control by then. And hopefully at some point, before that or in between, with a bit of help, I can bring this dream project alive. Yeah.
Now that you've told me about this, Be Want, I'm going to be chasing up on it. I'm going to be harassing you and asking you, Mishta, have you got started on it yet or not?
I would love that.
Be what?
Because dream projects tend to always go into the background, because there's always a client project that you have to finish, or sort of school uniforms that you have to chase, or some homework, something or the other. My daughter's just 10 at the moment, so dream projects tend to take a back seat. So I would absolutely love the chasing. Yeah.
Done. Wishing you all the best with your dream project and all the dream projects that may come your way, Mishta. Yeah, so happy to have had the chance to work
Thank
with you
you.
on so many of my books, and I look forward to working with you on more of my books.
Oh, it was my honor, Kiran. The fact that both of us and the cover is sort of made it to the, long list of the Oxford Prize was one of the loveliest things, because that was something I always wanted,
Fingers crossed,
and,
next
and it
book we do
happened with
together goes
your
and
book.
wins the prize, actually. So thank you so much, Mishta.
Thank you, Kiran.
And with that, it is a wrap on this episode of Chasing Creativity. We were chatting with Mishta Roy, and this is Kiran Manral signing out. Do follow me on my social media accounts. I'm at Kiran Manral everywhere. And subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Bingepods, and wherever you get your audio content. See you next week.